The 31st of May is fast approaching. That's the last date you can hand your notice in. Are you staying? Are you leaving? This is our story of our teaching career.
Hello and welcome back to another At the Chalkface with myself, Craig, and my colleague, Dave. So if you're new to this channel, we run an education company called Craig and Dave, and we resource all your needs for computer science. But we used to be computer science teachers ourselves, and before that, Dave, dare I say it, ICT teachers. And we did it for a long time. It's what we wanted to do. So we've ended up here running this company. And the reason I mention all this is we're doing a bit of a personal episode today. No sort of pushing our resources or talking about pedagogy, although we can't talk for more than 3 minutes without going into pedagogy. We don't have any special guests on. So we're going to do something that really has a personal connection with Dave and I have no doubt an awful lot of you out there. So there's the teaser, Dave. What are we talking about today? Start us off.
Yeah, well, really, as you said, it's our personal journey of our careers, and it's a reflection about whether we feel we made the right choices at the right times. Would we do things differently? Would we even go into teaching again? So thinking about myself, I started my teaching career in 1997. So I'm fast approaching 30 years in the profession at this point. So for me, is the question is, if I could go back 30 years, would I become a teacher again? For me, the answer is yes, absolutely. What about you?
Oh, okay. You've thrown that straight at me. Okay, let's start off simple before I get into nuanced. Would I go back and do teaching again? I think the simple answer is yes. There's a more nuanced response to that. But it is a profession I still love, still have passion for. I miss the teaching aspect. It was definitely the thing I was meant to do. Like you, by the way, it wasn't the thing I left out of university doing. I went into industry and then kind of took a left, and I'm so glad I ended up where I did. I probably should have done it from the start, but would I go back? Yes. And I've started straight out of university as well. Oh, I said I wasn't going to get too nuanced. Sorry, I've caught myself, Dave. Would I do it straight out of university? Because, of course, an interesting thing about us is that we both had commercial experience. And actually, with a subject like computer science, would I take away that? Probably not. I mean, that helped so much. Now, I'm going to be careful what I say here, Dave, and I'll let you sort of jump in with your opinion. I've always said there are certain subjects, I'll be careful here, maybe history, English, maths, the sort of the pure academic subjects, or the ones where you can't go and necessarily get an easy job in history, so to say. I understand it exists, but it's like, well, go in and teach it. Then there's other subjects, the more practical, arty subjects, which I consider computer science and art, where it's like, oh, my teacher has experience in that industry, walking the walk, talking the talk. I really felt that helped me being a programmer in environments with project management, with real deadlines. Yeah, very good off one there, Dave. What do you think?
Yeah, I think you were walking on eggshells a bit there. I do think some career. I say careers if teaching's not a career. Okay, backpedal myself again at this point. I think having some experience in your industry, in your subject specialism at secondary school is worth having. Because let's consider the alternative for a second. You do your GCSEs, you do your A levels, you go into university, you come out of university and you become a school teacher. And then you do that for 40 years. It is possible to do that. And there are people that do it. And I was quite a young-faced teacher at 24 years old, but I could potentially have been 22 years old.
Yeah,
I think that's a little bit young to be a teacher, to be perfectly honest. I think you're probably a bit too close to the age range of the students you're actually teaching at that point. That can become problematic. I also think, though, the main reason is you don't have that industry experience, that subject specialism knowledge in the field in which you're qualified to really draw on when you're giving examples to students and you're talking them through the real world. If you haven't got that real world experience, then I personally think that's a problem. So I wasn't in the industry for very long. I mean, don't get me wrong, I was only in the industry itself for about 18 months. before I then switched and became a teacher. So you could say, well, Dave, that's not really an experience, is it? You're a career teacher, aren't you? Let's face it. So hands up, yeah, I guess I am a career teacher, but even having that little bit of experience in the industry really helped me. And before that, I did a lot of Saturday jobs. So I worked in retail, I worked in and around IT in industry, as it were. And so I picked up quite a lot about networking and how systems work and, new features coming in and what it meant for training staff and things that can go wrong and how they go wrong and the importance of backups and all this kind of thing. I kind of learned a lot just through doing my Saturday jobs as well.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I'm similar story to you, but a bit different. I did sort of 5 years before I took the shift and then went into teaching. But I'm thinking now of my GCSE and especially my A-level classes. Some of the best things, some of the best lessons were where I could tie the theory to something I had done. And of course, my sixth ones used to love the game of how long can we distract him talking about a story of his days working for the government as a spy. I was not a spy; I was a civil servant. But of course, as soon as you tell me you work for the government, did you own a gun? But they really appreciated that, and taught them like this. Some of this stuff isn't just made up. And I was honest as a teacher, like, oh, this is academia. You're never going to use this in the real world, but you're going to learn it for your exams. But there's an awful lot which is relevant and you could apply. And yeah, maybe I was a bit glib earlier saying, oh, maths teachers don't need that experience and history teachers don't need that experience. And I apologise to other teachers. But I do think for the more creative, arty subjects, so I'm thinking your art, design, textiles, all of those, your computer science, there's an awful lot of subjects where I think the industry experience can really help ground the theory and the skills you're teaching, and I think the students would really appreciate that. So
Mm.
I've gone off on one, but no, I
But
wouldn't.
how?
I wouldn't start. I wouldn't start teaching straight at university. I wouldn't change anything. I would go
Yeah.
back. Is the answer to your question?
I was just going to say, before we kind of go any further, though, I think the thing that surprised me the most in my early teaching career is how little I actually knew about the subject.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, I mean, I had a love of computers and computing. I'd been programming since I was 9 years old. I felt I was quite a competent programmer, even when I, had left in university and was getting into the industry. And I had a degree in computer science, a little bit of industry experience. I felt I knew computing. I knew the field of computing. I knew the algorithms. I knew the data structures. I knew the core theory. I was set. I was ready to teach. And it was almost my very first lesson. And I can remember my very first lesson. I was teaching stacks to year 12. It was an
Wow.
awful lesson. And I think my mentor was very kind to me, to be perfectly honest, when I reflect back. But I realized almost instantly how little I actually knew. And it was exposed really quickly when students started asking questions of me as a teacher stood at the front of the room that I didn't really have the answer to. And the reason was I'd never asked the question myself. It's one thing to learn a subject, it's quite
Yeah.
another to be quizzed about it from any angle. Because students that know less than you ask questions with a real innocence and a real naivety. And they ask the questions that you wouldn't ask because you have the experience and the knowledge. And those kinds of questions can expose the weakness in the subject knowledge really quickly. And I remember
Mm.
thinking to myself, I don't know as much about this as I thought I did.
Okay. Right. Hands up. Any teacher watching this who at any point in their career, or maybe still, thinks they're suffering from imposter syndrome, and they just, I hope no one finds me out. You are not alone. Okay. I had it for a very long time. I think we've all had it. But some interesting facts here. As a teacher, naturally, the students in your class think you are the font of all knowledge and absolute authority on that subject. That's the way it is. Um, but it is not surprised that in Hattie's research, and I won't go into Hattie now, the effect of teacher knowledge on achievement is very far down the list. Yes, sure, you can't teach an A level without a certain depth of knowledge, same with GCSE, but it took me quite a while in my teaching before I realised I don't have to know everything. What I'd have is a skill set to know where to find out, a drive to continue to improve, and then you look at the things that make a bigger benefit in students' achievement. Oh, the ability to communicate clearly to students, the ability to be concise, the ability to get across concepts, teacher students relationships, the way you communicate knowledge. And obviously I won't give any names here. I had a member of my department for several years who was quite clearly the academically the smartest member of our department. I mean, the knowledge was phenomenal. And I was like, oh, blimey, he always knows everything. But they lacked the ability to communicate that knowledge to students. So, of course, they weren't an effective teacher. They would have been great lecturing at university. That's what?
Yeah, I knew it. I was waiting for the opportunity to say you were right. We can't go 3 minutes without talking about pedagogy. There
Oh,
it
yeah.
is, right there.
It's true, but the point is subject knowledge isn't actually as important as students think it is. I remember when the currently what we called the new A-level specs, the ones which are now 10 years old, remember us looking at those, even then with 15 and 10 years teaching experience, degrees in computer science, industry experience, looking at going, what on earth is that? We know what? I Google it. I go find out. I go watch some videos. I read a book. I go, oh, I totally get it, because I have the tools that allow me to go and pick up new knowledge if I don't know it. I know how to go learn. Whereas students, I know how to go learn. That sounds very caveman there, Dave. Whereas students, too often these days, it's like, I can't do it. What have you tried? I'm stuck. But obviously, as an adult, we've learned, well, I can start to learn anything. I just need to know how to go about learning. I remember at our school for a short period, it never lasts very long. We actually, year nines had a lesson a week on their timetable called Learning to Learn. Was that an initiative at your school? Yeah.
Still very much so.
Equipping students with the skills to learn how to learn. As adults, we take that for granted. So yeah, and we're still doing it to this very day, aren't we? I mean, we look like experts to some other teachers. How do you know all this? Well, we've just been applying and learning continuously. There's still plenty of times where I ring Dave and go, Dave, how does this work? Dave will be in secret here. Dave can expose you now. And Dave will be like, well, if I was being arrogant, I'd tell you, well, it's blah, blah, blah. But actually, while you've been talking, I've just asked ChatGTP. you,
Yes.
no one can know everything about everything.
Yes, I've had to reveal my secrets over the years. I used to at one point sort of just put myself on a pedestal above Craig, because he always used to look up to me as like you say, some kind of font of all knowledge of computing and teaching.
Well,
And
for those who,
I
yeah,
accidentally stumbled on my pedestal once and fell down and thought I can't climb back up.
yeah. Well, that's it. For those who don't know, I know a lot of you do. Dave, 20 plus years ago now, was my PGCE pathway subject mentor. So this was the chap I'd go and see every Thursday along with all the other trainees and sit there at the foot of Yoda as he spouted some stuff like, oh, this man knows everything. Of course, now I realise it was all completely smoke and mirrors. But I've learnt those smoke and mirror techniques and thus become an excellent teacher.
You have to know where to buy the mirrors, and you have to know how to create the smoke, and then you have to actually be the magician of the illusion. Come on, man, give me some credit.
It's a weird job, isn't it, teaching? I mean, a lot of people, I can't stand the phrase "those who can do and those who can't teach." I think, well, then try teaching, because I've often likened it, and I know other teachers will appreciate this. It is a job that has about 20 different hats on it. Yeah, you are part firefighter, part policeman, part judge, part parent, counselor, social worker. That there's so many different skills you pull on in dealing with a class of 30 different individual humans and then trying to get that knowledge across. It's but when it works, which I think is why when you said, would I go back and do it again? The answer is yes. I loved it and I didn't want to leave. And maybe we'll get into that. But yeah, I'd go back and do it. The profession's certainly changed.
Yeah, I think all professions change. I do know where you're going because we've had conversations about, oh, it's not like it was back in our day. But I think every teacher can say
Yeah.
that. And I remember in my very early days of my teaching career, we had wine club on a Friday. So
Oh,
picture this, right? So Friday lunchtime, there would be a group of staff that would go off to the pub. They all have to teach in the afternoon, by the way. And but I belonged to the slightly more upmarket wine club, right?
of course you did.
I didn't know the first fiddle about wine. I was quickly found out about that as well. But the point is that we would all sit around at lunchtime, and there would always be two bottles of red and a bottle of white. And we would pretend that we were wine critics, and we would give scores to the wine, and not a single drop was left before we went to go and teach period 5. But I remember the teachers even in those days saying, "Oh, well, of course, this was the smoking room back in the day." And then before that, it was, oh, there used to be a pool table in here. I can't believe they've taken the pool table away. And I know in some schools they still have this situation, but the schools I worked in very quickly
Yeah.
modernized, let me put it that way. And suddenly, I mean, can you imagine having a drink of wine in the staff room now on a Friday afternoon? It's like, it wouldn't happen, would it? Not in your average school, anyway. That's what
It
I'm talking
certainly
about.
didn't happen. Certainly didn't happen in mine. No,
No.
the most you'd get is maybe at the end of term when all the kids had finally gone up, and you went up to say goodbye to the staff who were
Yeah,
leaving, and then if you were lucky, the SLT had bought a few bottles of really chimp plonk from Bargain Booze,
that's right. Yeah, yeah, that's right. A bit like
and
the
none of us could
suitcase
drink it.
going
We
into
were all
Downing
about to
Street.
drive. Yeah, and we all couldn't drink it anyway because we all had to drive home.
Yeah. Anyway, look, we digress. Let's get back to it. So that was me in the staff room, not knowing half as much as I felt I should, feeling completely out of my depth, both in the classroom and in the staff room. And that was my early introduction to teaching, which I did for a couple of years before I then took my first promotion, which for me was to be an assistant head of year. Now I'll get into that, but just talk me through your sort of early years, as it were, Craig.
Um, Well, I mean, my early years, obviously, we're not going to talk about pay scales and everything, but I progressed up the main pay scale, and thoroughly enjoyed the job. And it wasn't many years until a sort of head of department role came up. There weren't other opportunities for me in there. There were others presented, but not ones I was interested in. So obviously, as teachers will know, you've got two main routes, haven't you? And I know there are little offshoots, and you've done some clever things, but really, it's do I progress down the pastoral route, which is what you've just said, assistant head, head teacher, head of key stage, or do you down the academic route? And I was quite happy. No, I'll be a form tutor throughout school, and I enjoy that, but I want to progress down the academic route. So I didn't come for any of those sort of assistant head of year opportunities. So the first promotion I went for was a head of department.
But I think that's where I'm headed with this, because we've not talked about this. So I'm genuinely interested. The first promotional opportunity that came along, I took it, and I took it for a
Yeah,
reason, and I'll get onto that in a second. But it sounds like you spent a few years not taking potential promotional opportunities. Things would have
yeah,
been presented, and you took a conscious decision.
that's
That's
true.
not what I'm going to do. I'm interested in that, and then perhaps after you've told me a little bit about that, it's fair to say you weren't successful becoming a head of department at your first attempt. So again, I'm interested in what motivated you to go for that post, how you
Yeah.
felt when you didn't get it, and then what you did to get it in the end, as it were. Talk me through all that.
Wow, open up sore wounds there, Dave. Didn't get my first promotion. Yeah, sure. Let's revisit that trauma. Um, yeah. No, you're right. It's not like there were an awful lot of opportunities. It wasn't actually too long into my career that I got the head of department. But yes, there were definitely at least one or two opportunities that came up down the pastoral route. And it was really quite a simple decision for me. I just didn't. I just wasn't interested. So it'd be interesting to hear your perspective. But I just wasn't interested in progressing on to sort of any sort of management scale or responsibility scale down the pastoral route. I loved the tutor group aspect. Always enjoyed my tutor groups. Appreciated them. Still aware of a couple of them today. You bump into them occasionally at age 30. That makes you feel old, doesn't it? 30 or 35, and they tell you and they remember you. And I enjoyed that, but that was as far as I ever wanted to go. So in my head, it wasn't even a consideration. They'd come up and I wouldn't look at them. So you're right. It looked like the head of department from our school wasn't going to go anywhere, and I thought, I'm ready now. I'm ready for one. And a head of department role came up at Stroud High, an all-girls grammar, and I thought, oh, okay, we'll go from this comprehensive school, which I have thoroughly enjoyed, to an all-girls grammar school. That would be a shift, won't it? And I remember applying and being all very confident, and I had my plan and all the rest of it. And I thought the lesson went well, and the interview went well, and the student panel went well. And then, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Sargent, you haven't got the job. I later found out it went to an internal candidate. Now, don't get crappy about that, Craig. You were internal candidate and got your next head of department job. But sometimes you realise, oh, is this one of those? I don't want to sound bitter. Is it one of those vacancies where we generally want to find the best person, or is it, oh, we've got the job for someone internally and we have to advertise it? Now that is very, very unfair, but at the time that's how I felt. I was like, well, you've wasted my time, blah blah blah. Luckily I had sensible people around me that brought me back down to earth and went, just get over yourself. And then it was within a year that the head of department at our school did go, and then I went for that job. And yeah,
Isn't
thoroughly.
it? If I missed something there though, because wasn't there a situation at the school where you did eventually become head of department,
Yeah.
where you had applied there to be head of department as well, and they actually gave it to your colleague who they were more experienced than you, but they certainly didn't have your subject knowledge or your rapport with the
Oh my God,
students.
you really are opening the wounds. You're talking about my
Yeah.
lifelong friend Ian, which I will mention. I don't mind mentioning Ian. Ian, if you're watching this stuff, hello, buddy. So Ian and I joined as NQTs together in the same year, and we were shoved in the old building with the CRT monitors. All the new stuff was taken by the head of department and the existing teacher. So the two NQTs were shoved in a building on the other side of the site, a 10-minute walk away from the head department. Make that work. Next to each other. I had a room with CRTs where we still had the mouse. Sorry, I'm reminiscing now. Had the mouse balls in, but because kids nicked the mouse balls, the technicians would glue the bottom of the mouse shut, which meant all that happened is they carried on collecting dust and they would then stop working. Meanwhile, Ian next door had air conditioning that leaked and a waterfall down it. Yes, Ian, that's right. And when our head department left, we both went for it. And again, I arrogantly assumed, because my subject knowledge was better than Ian's, and Ian won't mind me saying this because he was always asking me for help, and we still talk to this day. I just assumed I would get it. It's the arrogance of youth, I think, partly as well. Of course, Ian, whereas I said I had sort of 5 years experience, Ian had a lifelong of experience. So as well as multiple jobs, he'd done at least 10, 15 years in the army as well. And I'm appreciating now in my late 40s, approaching 50s, you can't really there's no substitute for time and life experience, I think is what I'm trying to say. I didn't have experience of leading teams or managing or handling people. Ian had oodles of that. And I remember thinking, how could they give that job to Ian? I then was under Ian as a head of department for several years, and I learned a very different side of things. I watched how he would protect the team
Yeah.
from initiatives. It's like things would come down. It's like, right, we have to do this, and I will fight your case. And he would be a barrier between us and SLT. Not that it's a them and us strategy, but I saw something that I never realized was such an important skill. He stood by his team 100%. He covered your backs. He stood up for you. He let you know what you needed to know. If you had a whinge, you could go and have a whinge, and it wouldn't be that the SLT would know you're complaining or whinging. It was like, oh, my staff are complaining again. They'd never know. He would take it all on his shoulders. And I remember the day I left Archway, sort of 15 years later. Ian was still there. But hang on, Craig, you said you were head of department, but he was your boss. Yeah, Ian actually stepped down after several years as head of department and said, I just want to go back to being a normal teacher. So he'd been my boss, and then I became his boss. And I remember when I left after 15 years, I give you a leaving speech, and I did a few bits here and there and a few jokes, but I always had planned my final mention was for Ian. And I remember it to this day, and I apologise, Ian, if you're watching. But I said, and I have to say, for my final thank you for Ian. We started as NQTs together. You became my boss. I became your boss. And I told a very brief version of the story about how I was so arrogantly cross that I didn't get the job, and how on earth could they give it to Ian? He doesn't know the subject. And Ian there was laughing away, and everyone else was laughing away. Of course, what I learned from being under Ian, there's an awful lot more, and we said at the start, to being a good teacher or a leader than there is just from subject knowledge. And I said to Ian, I wouldn't be the person I am today, and I wouldn't be the effective teacher and team leader and manager I am today if I hadn't have met you. And there was this genuine awe, and the closest I ever saw in 15 years from Ian having a tear, being an ex-army man. He wasn't fond of emotions, but he was like, very kind, Craig. but yes, you're right. Yes, so I lost 2 jobs. Thank you, Dave, for bringing that all back up.
Well, like a stickler for detail and all that. I have to just make sure the audience know the full story of your career here. Yeah. Not all success, right? Anyway,
not at all. But right things for right reasons at the right time, I believe. Working under Ian made me appreciate a whole skill set I didn't even realise that I needed. And obviously SLT had seen that in Ian. And if I'd got that job straight away, I might not have developed, and I might not have been as good a leader, because I might have not realised those skills were so important. Definitely a bit of an arrogant youth, I think.
Absolutely. That he taught you how to manage a team. And essentially, the head of department isn't about your subject knowledge. No, it's about managing people. And so, as you say, that's a completely different skill set. And it's quite warming to hear that what he actually provided was the buffer. He prevented the things that were happening on the ground floor getting up to management that, would cloud strategy and weren't necessary and would create unnecessary angst that wasn't really there. But similarly, he was creating that buffer coming down as well and saying, okay, this is what we have to do in terms of leading our school forward. But what does it mean for my team, and what does it mean for my individual members of my team, and the strategy that we're employing within our own subject area? How can we make this work in a way that resonates with our subject? And as you say, that's a completely different skill set. So being that buffer in the middle that allows things to filter down and things to filter up, but that doesn't mean everything necessarily comes down, and it certainly doesn't mean everything necessarily goes up. That's the critical thing, right? So for me, I'd been teaching a couple of years, and an opportunity for an assistant head of year came up, and I really, really wanted it. And the reason that I really, really wanted it is because in the first couple of years of my career, I had a real bond and an affection for my tutor group. They, to me, were my babies. I was looking out for them, right across the school and everything that was happening. And I had a lad that, I really liked in my tutor group, and he had forgotten to get his mum to sign his homework diary. And this was a thing in the school that you had to every week get your parent to sign your homework diary. And I was the kind of teacher that I felt quite early in my career, I'd got the line right between respect and almost a genuine affection for the students, and being able to kind of be on their side, but we're not, I'm not down with the kids. You know what I mean? I got that line right, I think. But I did protect my tutor group because they kind of felt special to me. So I would be like, oh, okay, well, don't worry about it today, but can you get that done tomorrow? And, nobody's going to notice if we sign that tomorrow. No one's going to notice. Just go and sort that out. And so I would do these little deals with my tutor group, whatever it was. Someone would get into trouble with a piece of homework. They'd come running to me. Bear in mind, they're year sevens, right? So they would come to me and they'd be like, "Oh, Mr. Hilliard, I'm going to get put into detention because I haven't done this homework." And I'd be like, "Just leave this to me." And I would go and have a conversation with the teacher, because I got quite a good relationship with the teachers in the school quite quickly as well. And I'd be like, "Look, I've come to tell you that, Jack's beside himself because he hasn't done his homework. He doesn't want to let you down, and he knows he's going to let you down. He doesn't know I'm even telling you this, but is there any chance we could, just sort something out here? I'm sure he can hand it in tomorrow." And it'd be like, "Of course, Dave, all right," and so I'd be able to go back to Jack and say, "Look, it's sorted. As long as you get this in tomorrow, you won't be in trouble." Okay. And this was the kind of relationship that I'd built up with my tutor group. Anyway, one day I was off on a course or something. I was away for the day, and it was homework signing day. And one of my tutees, who I'd got a good relationship with, they hadn't got their homework diary signed. And I think they knew the deal, which was, "We'll get it done tomorrow and it'll be okay. Mr. Hilliard's a cool guy." But I wasn't there. And the assistant head of year took my tutor group, which was the kind of thing that used to happen. They would sort of muck in if one of the tutors wasn't there. And but he was a stickler for the rules. And so when one of my tutees didn't have their homework diary signed, this was a major offence, and they immediately got put into detention.
Oh, get over it.
Yes. And this child was in tears, right? Because this isn't how it worked. And so I came back the following day, and they're in tears, and I'm like, "What is going on? Oh, I got detention." Oh. Anyway, so I was like, "Oh, all right, I've got to use a bit of my magic here." So I went to see the assistant head of year, who was kind of my boss pastorally.
Yeah.
And I said, "Got this little situation, but can we just let it go this one time? It's not something that happens regularly. It's an oversight. They're only in year 7. They're learning." And he basically said, "Yeah, that's right, David. They're learning. And the lesson they're going to learn is they do as they're told. Because if they don't do as they're told, they're going to get punished. And then they will definitely do as they're told next time. That's the lesson they're learning. So off you go." And I was like, wow, okay, this is not what I was expecting. And from that moment forward, I was like, "I'm going to have your job.
Hey!
And I'm going to show you how the job should be done."
Because you believe teaching with a stick as opposed to a carrot is the way to do it.
Yeah.
And as we know, go on.
That's the story of my teaching career. I mean, we'll take this further into another episode, because there's so much that we can say, and there's so much more ground to cover. But essentially, that has been the story of my career. I have been very, very content. I have not chased promotions unnecessarily, which has meant it took a long time for me to kind of get to where I got to in the end. But every time I took a promotion, it was because I looked at the person above me and thought, "I can do this job better than you." And part of that was an arrogance. I'm not going to lie. Just like you, Craig, part of me, it was just pure arrogance. And that was not fair on my superiors. But there was certainly an element of truth about it as well. And I did feel like I could get better outcomes if only this was done in a slightly different way. And I've proved that in my teaching career. So yes, a lot of it was arrogance, and a lot of it was just a genuine desire to want to do better. And so, as it so happened, that teacher got a promotion into a head of department job in another school. It opened up the opportunity for an assistant head of year job, which I wasn't really going down that road like you. I was really very much computer science through and through. I had no idea about, pastoral and that kind of thing, other than having an affection for the students.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, I was desperate to get this job. And the head teacher had been quite impressed with what I was able to bring to the school in terms of computer science, and some of the things that I was doing in industry I then brought into education. And he was, quite genuinely surprised at how I could transform things in the school through IT. And so essentially the job was mine, which was great. And so I became an assistant head of year. It only lasted a year. So maybe next time we'll get into what happened next. Good. Right. Well, we're going to leave it there, and we'll pick this up in a second episode, because there's so much more about our teaching careers that we're ready to share with you. And I'm sure that some of our stories resonate, and I'm sure some of our stories leave you in horror. But I'll leave you with this question for the comments below. What have you done for your tutees, or for those students in your school that other teachers couldn't reach? The untouchables, the unreachables. What have you done to reach them? Comments below.